a work I have been doing in the last years. It is moving from more historical research to answer to more, um, let's say, questions that are more important for the moment, which are connected to the role of heritage in our society, and particularly the role of preservation as a tool for sustainable architecture. This is inside the program of the University of Notre Dame's School of Architecture. University of Notre Dame is based in Indiana in the US, and we have also a part of the program that is in Rome. We have started a Master in Historic Preservation, which is focused exactly on coupling historic preservation with sustainable architecture. Why the reason for that? The reason is that you might know that in the recent years, there is more and more an understanding of the role of heritage, the role of the past building cultures, and the importance they have in current society. The recovery of past building techniques is very important for several reasons, and I will try to discuss the reason for that. In a sense, and I will also talk about this, there is archaeology can play a quite important role into the understanding how to approach sustainable architecture. We will see. This program, which is very much based in history and archaeology, might not consider that issues related to preservation are not consistent with the narrative. But in the reality, the preservation of our past is a tool that is extremely important. It is extremely important because it allows to preserve evidence from the past and to interpret for future generations. At the same time, this preservation has been given in the past a very passive role, while today we are trying to activate that in our society in several manners. One of them is exactly in the field I work with, which is architecture. In reality, one of the pressing questions is that when we look at the past, we can realize that there was a competence in the construction and something else. There was a more balanced way in which human beings approach nature and the use of resources. Next slide, please. If you look at the impressive remains, of course, in Rome, of imperial buildings of the Roman times, we discovered that Roman concrete, which is, as you know, is a building technique that was developed by the Romans, particularly in central Italy, and which was based on the use of pozzolans, which is this volcanic ash that is typical in Rome and Naples. When we look at these buildings are shown to be extremely resilient, and be extremely strong. So differently from current cement and concrete, ancient concrete shows to be a much better material, and it's something that we struggle to understand why. So it's interesting to see that in the past cultures, buildings like the Pantheon, which remains an unsurpassed achievement in architecture, because the Pantheon is made out of the dome, which is 45 meters, is made out of concrete, but is not reinforced concrete as the one we use today. So there is a lot to learn from this. But how to learn that? because the problem is that uh, all the systems of construction of the past are based on knowledge transfer, and once there is a loss in the knowledge transfer, we miss to understand secrets, which we do consider as being what we call the intangible part of heritage. So the way a craftsman uh, teaches from father to son the secrets of any kind of work, which includes the development of ways to address the trade, we are in trouble. Next slide. Uh, so ancient materials so have undergone a sequential selection and filtering over the time. As you see in this slide, this is in Morocco. This is a village where the whole village there are several lime kilns, and it is impressive to go there because you understand by speaking with with the locals who uh, who are producing lime, that they have a knowledge of raw materials that are the result of a very long process. Next slide. Uh, the next slide should be a video. I don't know if, yes, you can play the video. It goes very slowly. So he's showing here two stones. They look very simple. They look very equal. But he's explaining me that these two stones react in a different manner into the furnace. You see the kiln here. It's producing, is burning limestone, and this limestone is made with a selection of stones. So you look at the stones look to me exactly the same. But then you speak with these people and they explain, the one stone is good for making plaster, the other one is good for making mortar. And you look at the stones, say exactly the same. So there is some knowledge that is behind that, which results in having products and artifacts which are unique in quality. So what we learn is that in every place and region, builders take advantage of local materials and knowledge developed throughout the time, and maximize benefit from their use. So this kind of approach uh, is has distinguished past building cultures, and particularly before the advent of modern the modern building culture and the modern society. So working with heritage has the benefit of dealing with a less sophisticated building industry, and thus offering chances to approach building traditions which have not been corrupted by the current building industry. I would simply say that if you think about today's building sector, and I ask you to express how much you know about the materials that are used, the technologies that are used, how much you are aware of the so-called processes, the result will be very poor. While in the past building cultures, everyone in the society was more or less aware of which were the best materials, which were the best craftsmen, and could rely on a quality without having to suffer. When you build your house, when you do your apartment, you always struggle to understand if the result will be good or not, and you can't rely on understanding the process. Next slide, please. So my discussion will be based on the following topics. the climate crisis and the need to find sustainable solutions for architecture. The reason is simple. Today, all the discussion on sustainability is based on the fact that we have a situation that, I'm sorry, we have a situation where uh, the climate change is having some effects on nature, which are extremely heavy, and we need to address and change our habits, and particularly in the building sector. The second point is that the example of historic buildings as models of sustainability, and as we will see, there is a very famous statement of an American architect that says that the most sustainable building is one that already exists. We will go on back to this statement. And the third point is the tools to analyze and understand historic buildings. So this is, I will show you how we are approaching to this topic. So in the last 2 centuries, there has been a change not only in our mindset in terms of materials. Think about, for instance, in the faith in strong binders for construction. So cement is fabulous, it's fantastic, against weak binders. When I say weak binders, I refer to the fact that frequently, if you work in the field of archaeology, you know that humble construction, vernacular construction, is made with earthen mortars, with very few lime, a lot of earth, and this distinguished past building cultures. Today, the faith is in strong binders, and this is one of the reasons. But also, our mindset has also changed in the understanding the role of artisans and craftsmen. For instance, in the past, the construction of a house was depending on the craftsmen. So the craftsmen were the ones who were doing the building. Today, it's the architect who is doing the building, and the name of the craftsman completely disappear. So the architect, next slide, has generated processes where the artisans are excluded from the project. Architects, to keep the lead, have generated complexities and procedures, as the one you can see on the screen. These are some of the many procedures that you need to go through to make a good building. In order, they have made that, the architects, in order to control the building process through certified procedures. In the 17th century, next slide, yes, this one. In the 17th century, a single plan was all that you needed for the construction of a house in London. This is incredible. This is the contract for the construction of a house in the 17th century in London. And in many other cases, vernacular architecture was the product of the community itself. So the community was working together to achieve a result. So the result of all is, next slide, is that our buildings are more and more disconnected from the places, globalized in their technologies and materials, and express no local identity. What you see here could be everywhere. It's urban neighborhood where you see buildings made out of concrete do not express any particular identity in terms of materials, in terms of architecture, while you see in the foreground, you see some vernacular architecture which express this kind of relationship between architecture and the place. So craftsmen have lost their role. Whatever building you may find in periodicals, artisans are hardly mentioned as those who, with their experience and know-how, have contributed to the final result. Next slide. These are the three masons I have been working with in the 1990s and early 2000 for the restoration works in the Palatine in Rome, in the Domus Tiberiana. These were people who made the restorations. The ones who knew about the materials, they knew how to work with Roman construction and made appropriate interventions. So in reality, archaeology has a lot to say, has incredible ways in which can suggest us solutions for the simple reason that in archaeological findings, we have the capacity to look at the reality of buildings in a very unusual manner. Next slide, please. In a very unusual manner, as you see, next slide, please. One, yes, that one. So in this slide, you see these are the ramparts of Vidolanda in the UK, which were built with turf blocks. So turf is particularly is this grass which is cut and used as it is for the construction of walls. So this is one example. Next slide, please. And other examples are in every archaeological place or in any vernacular site that has not been touched by the current building approach. So it's made out of earthen material, it's made out of local materials, and all this expresses something that is against what we consider to be the take, make, waste culture that was developed after the Second World War, when people started to take advantage of the increase of energy due to the fact that the fossil fuels were used to produce energy, and so they started to take materials in a more and more massive way to transform them for building their environment, and at the end of a typically short life, to waste these materials. So this is the take, make, waste society, which of course is not confined only in the field of construction, but expresses today our whole style of life. All this has produced, next slide, please. All this has produced detrimental effects on our planet. Take this, I don't know how many of you are aware about this, the overshoot day. The overshoot day is the day when a country has used already all the natural resources that the country can produce in 1 year. And what you discover is that, for instance, this is in 2022, the United States have used their available resources produced by the country in 1 year by March 13. That is to say that they need to take resources from other parts of the planet. Qatar has the record in having already used their resources by February the 10th, and Jamaica is the most virtuous of all the countries, having exploited their resources by December the 20th. So this gives you a really dramatic scene about what is going on our planet. Next slide, please. And the fact is that, as we say, climate change is anthropogenic. So it's generated by human beings, and by human beings is the only way to solve the problem. This means a change in attitude, a change in behavior, a change which currently in Europe is expressed by as you know, by the Green Deal. However, in the Green Deal, it's surprisingly there is a complete lack of understanding the role of culture and heritage. So this is the point where we do consider is necessary to invest energies and have synergies by all the people who work in the sector of culture. So it's something that involves all the ingenuity of people working with culture and understanding how culture can contribute to change our behavior. Next slide. One of the elements, the reason why I work with the building sector is not only because I am an architect, but particularly because I am aware of the fact that the building sector is one of the most contributing sectors to the climate crisis. And it continues to offer solutions to that in reality are based on energy consumption, and so we need to apply and find solutions that address this a more sustainable approach. It is a global issue. It is a global issue which cannot be tackled only through technology. It has to be tackled on many ways. I will go ahead by showing the case of next slide of the typical need you have if you want to repair a house. You say, I want to repair the house according to the traditional knowledge, so using low energy technologies, as for instance mud brick, and I say, okay, I will do that. But then, as in the case of Khan in Mudurnu in Turkey, there is this guy he is keen to preserve one historic house in his village, and the problem is where to go and take the materials. Where is the best clay to be used for construction? This is the intangible knowledge that we have lost, because the local people of the village knew about the materials because they through a very long experimental process, they have learned how to use these materials. So it is clear that we need to reconsider all that, not only the tangible part of heritage, but also the intangible part, and be aware. Next slide. That traditional building processes were based on material resources that were used in construction from local places. So this is the statement that the greenest building is not the one you see made out of glass, because it's a matter of what we call life cycle assessment. The materials you are using, how much energy they needed to be produced, how much energy they needed to be transported and transferred to the place, how much energy they need to be dismissed. In traditional construction, materials were local and developed solutions that were consistent with the environment, also in terms of climate comfort. Think about, for instance, in Cyprus, the traditional houses that were made with mud bricks, and consider, for instance, that a mud brick construction, once it is abandoned, the material is naturally reabsorbed into nature without having the need to dismiss. Next slide. So the study of buildings, of vernacular architecture, can be, of course, can inspire, because the vernacular architecture in particular have a very important role, because they display in a very clear manner the solutions for constructions which were developed locally. A more sophisticated building typically is more difficult to be to understand which were the solutions that were developed by the builders. But in vernacular architecture, this is straightforward. So this is the reason why we do consider that vernacular architecture is an important element for readdressing. So if we go to next slide, we will see, for instance, what we did during the conservation works for the Armenian church in Nicosia, that where we had masons who were able to reproduce the original building techniques. You see, these are the typical mud brick walls that you can find in Nicosia. They are the bricks are very particular in their dimensions, and you see they are preparing the binding agent is earth, which is mixed with water and used as a binder. So this is not only super sustainable, but has excellent thermal properties. The houses made with mud bricks have a much higher capacity to give comfort, particularly in the very hot climate of Cyprus. And at the same time, they offer an extremely high resistance to stresses. Of course, it's a matter to rethink about how you can use all that. Next slide. So this is what happened today. So you build and then you demolish to build something new. Lifespan 30, 40, 50 years against the 100, 200, 300 years or more of traditional buildings. Among the many negative and critical issues that need to be urgently addressed are mass-produced materials, low-cost materials, short-term life cycle products and artifacts, high energy production processes, long distance sourcing that increases transportation, design that disregards functionality, and individualist design approaches that aim to glorify the designer even to the disadvantage of the user. So this is what happens today. The architect prevails with ideas to express his own uh, uh, role against the fact that an architect works for the people who are going to live. And so I would say that I'm rather critical with my colleagues. Um, so at this point, next slide, we need to understand which is the way we can use the knowledge from traditional buildings uh, and how to transfer that in contemporary architecture. This is something that we are working on. Is as you know, there is not much traditional architecture currently in use in the building sector. All local materials are not used. There is a lot of import from faraway places. And so what we do is we look, first of all, to preservation works as a source of inspiration. This this tower is in Valencia. Is an Islamic construction, and the interventions you see that there are some patches made by the builders are made exactly with the same building techniques that were used originally. So at a certain point, we understood that for the preservation of buildings, it is necessary to reuse traditional building techniques. So there was a loss in knowledge, and because of preservation, we went back to the reuse of traditional building techniques. Next slide. I don't know how much time I have for. At a certain point, you should give me when, let's say, I have my time. About 10 minutes before when I have to end. You just give me a signal so that I know that when to end my lecture. Here we have two very important scholars in Italy, who are Paolo Marconi and Antonino Giuffre. They worked particularly in the 1980s. They started to think about the role of heritage preservation. Their position actually evolved. Next slide. Their position evolved from 50 years of disasters on heritage buildings caused by the employment of modern materials, modern techniques, and modern approaches to structural design. These are the famous lintels of the Propylaea of Athens that, as you know, they were reinforced by balanos by inserting in their inside, cutting the marble. These are considered one of the most spectacular lintels in antiquity, and particularly in classical period. They were cut to be reinforced, and they inserted inside, as you see, reinforced concrete. So iron started to rust, and by rusting, developed a bigger volume, and started to make pressure on concrete, and expanding, started to breaking the marble to the point that all the interventions made with concrete in the Acropolis of Athens had to be dismantled and the cement repairs removed. What was revolutionary in Paolo Marconi and Antonino Giuffre was that they started a new approach in conservation, which was based on the recovery of traditions and local practices with their adaptations to building rules, which started to be reconsidered and studied. So next slide. This shows a typical and current building practice. I saw that many ongoing works in historic buildings in Athens. You take a stone building made with traditional construction, and what they do to adapt it to the current rules and codes, they have to change it to become like a concrete wall. So they, as you see, they apply a metal mesh, and on the metal mesh you apply cement. You lose completely, of course, the historical values, but at the same time you lose also the traditional capacity of buildings to behave and work. It is clear that according to this idea by Paolo Marconi and Antonio Giuffre, the restoration could play a very important point in recovering past knowledge. But we want to go even beyond that. And what we understand, because of what we were discussing about the climate crisis and the need to change the current approaches to architecture, we understood that we need to pass from to take preservation not only as something that we use for the preserving our past heritage, according to the traditional building methods, but to use preservation and in a sense with an active role as something that can, the knowledge that we get from preservation works, next slide, can pass to current buildings, as we were saying about the Armenian church in Cyprus. One of the ways to do that is to approach the local building traditions through an intensive work of analysis, documentation, and interpretation, going beyond the limited variety expressed in the manuals. Next slide. And in this, of course, I would return again on the role of archaeology, which is extremely important. The manuals are a codification of disciplinary expertise and give general instruction on construction according to the best practice. As you see, this is a manual showing how to do in a best way possible according to a technology some building solutions. However, one thing that is not in these manuals is what is gained through the experience of developed in a place throughout the time. And this experience, the only way that we can take this experience is exactly through the understanding of local variations, because the manuals tells you this has to be done in this way to be appropriate, but there are hundreds of ways to adapt a building to its local situation. Next slide. And I'm going to show you this kind of work we are doing in at the School for Recording Heritage. This is a historic building, 1880 in Indiana, in the United States. So it dates before the explosion of the balloon frame construction. It is made with local materials. The study of this building is extremely interesting for the way it shows the experience gained by local builders with the local materials. So these buildings show what we call variations of vernacular architecture. That is to say, there are some rules for construction, but there are variations that are developed locally by experiencing the local materials. So it's a matter of starting to think to go from a global dimension to go to a more local dimension. And we are interested to understand how these local traditions developed in a place, and of course, through what? Through a trial and error process, and how we can use that to redevelop this kind of knowledge. So as we depart from the principles of current and sustainable construction and its dependence on strong structural bonds as iron, concrete, as we said, vernacular practices become meaningful, showing us how they achieve sound construction using weak structural mortars. And the example of Cyprus is very clear. Lime and gypsum were used parsimoniously in vernacular architecture, and of course, because they were expensive materials, or because the raw materials were scarcely available. So we can learn a lot from this vernacular architecture. Next slide. If now this, I don't know, if you click, there must be a kind showing the way the analysis is done. Unfortunately, it's very, in my screen is like the screen is big like a stamp, so I cannot see very much from my telephone. So if you click, there must be, you see the analysis of the contact points between the stones. So you have on the left, you show a stone construction, and on the right, you have all the analysis that is made understanding this local construction. Panos, can you click and see if there is appear some dots pop out in the slide? Okay, so very well. So we see that the red points. So the blue is a big stone. You see, the big stones are placed in the lower part of the wall. So because it takes effort to place in the upper part the bigger stones, and then in the upper part, we understand the layering. Go ahead with the there is a red dotted line, I suppose you see, where you understand that there is a layer. So what we do, like when we do this kind of reading of the wall, we understand how the masons were actually analyzing and working to interpret and understand the construction. Next slide. Next, yes. Here is another example. I want to give you this example. This is about a Roman building in Sorrento. Here is the analysis, more or less made in a similar fashion, but on a Roman building, and you see the way we understand which are the materials that were selected for construction. So this is typical in ancient architecture, in traditional architecture, that you select first of all the materials, and then to use them in the best way possible for the aim of construction. So sometimes, for instance, in Roman vaults, you are using the lighter tuff because to develop a smaller thrust on vaults. Yeah, so we look at the materials, we look at the way they were transformed, so the shape they have, and at the same time, we look at the way they were assembled. By doing so, we just enter into the construction. It's in this way you understand that we are using drawings as a fundamental tool for interpreting and understanding historic architecture. The graphic analysis of construction, taking advantage of the cognitive process activated by hand drawings, because all these are hand drawings, shows building elements in a critical way, and thus it is of paramount importance if we want to recover building traditions that are lost. In this becomes fundamental what we call the building archaeology methodology, which is the way we analyze today historic buildings. In building archaeology, we develop diagrams, so reason drawings, which allow to enter into the history of the building. And in this way, we enter into the building culture that has originated the buildings, and we understand how to do all this. All this needs, of course, to train young generations. It's something that we need to invest on. We have lost our capacity to analyze, and we need to absolutely go back to understand all that. Next slide. This is one more example of construction. Again, here, if you click, you will see that this is the analysis of the floor. You see also the dimension of the nails, and then you have if you click again, you see the use of bricks in the corner of the opening because they need to strengthen the windows. And then if you click, you see there are timber elements which are used. This is in Indiana. It's a very cold climate. And if you click again, you will see that there is in yellow, there are these interior laths, these timber elements, which create a cavity between the masonry wall and the interior in order to insulate the interior wall and create a more comfort into the house. And finally, it's very nice. You see where there is if you click again, so you see where the arrow is. This is the way they were sealing a seal between the frame of the window. And this triangular element is a timber element which makes fixes horse hair, which allow not the wind and the air not to pass in the joint between the frame of the window, is a sash window, and the masonry. So this is the way you can analyze all that. So we next slide, please. So we need to train young generations. These are our students working in one house, and these are the type of drawings on the right that they develop through analysis. It's a critical analysis. It's not a matter of a beautiful drawing, but it's a matter of entering into the understanding all the elements that distinguish and compose a traditional building, and then extract all that and make it available for new construction or to develop new solutions for contemporary architecture. As to conclude, next slide, I would like to offer you something that is extremely important. Some of you might know about the declaration of the Faro Declaration, which is a very important monument made by the Council of Europe. And this declaration is about the participative role of the community. It's not only a matter of training experts and professionals that know how to do the things. It's not only a matter of having a building industry and codes and whatever needed to make it possible to make a more sustainable architecture, but it's extremely important to have the active role of the community. People need to understand. And the best way to do that is also to disseminate the contents of heritage. So in the last years, there is the development of what we call heritage communities. And this is one of the most extraordinary ones. This is in Naples, is La Paranza. This is a group of young people from one neighborhood, which was a neighborhood which was very neglected. There was a lot of criminality. And these people, through their active role in promoting heritage in their neighborhood, they succeeded to regenerate the neighborhood. Next slide. You see here, they are in the catacombs of San Gaudioso. So what happens when you have a community that is active and understands heritage? The community has a strong power also to disseminate and make things work because it's a bottom-up approach. So all this discussion about how we will tackle the climate emergency, how we are going to understand the role of heritage, how we are going to change the mindset of people, is very much understanding the role of heritage, but also understanding the role of the community. Thank you very much.